Good evening, fellow travelers through the corridors of time. Tonight, the sleepless historian invites you to embark on a journey not of grand battles or sweeping political upheavals, but into the subtle, often overlooked, quietude of a truly remarkable era, Edo Japan. For over 250 years, from the early 17th to the mid-19th century, Japan experienced a period of unprecedented peace and internal stability under the ironclad, yet subtly administered, rule of the Tokugawa shogunate. When we think of feudal Japan, images of fierce samurai, dramatic conflicts, and heroic tales often spring to mind. But beneath this surface of martial prowess lay a society that, by deliberate design, cultivated a profound sense of order, discipline, and most importantly, tranquility. This wasn't the silence of absence, but the quiet hum of a highly structured world, where daily life unfolded with a gentle rhythm, often unnoticed by the grand chronicles of history. Tonight, we won't chase the echoes of clashing swords or the roar of distant armies. Instead, we will listen closely to the whispers of everyday life. We will explore the subtle sounds, the unspoken rules, and the quiet customs that define the existence of millions, from the highest samurai to the humblest peasant. We will peer into the hidden corners of homes, workshops, and communal spaces, seeking to understand the quiet patience, the refined sensibilities, and the enduring spirit that blossomed in an age of enforced peace and isolation. Imagine, if you will, the gentle rustle of a kimono, the soft padding of bare feet on tatami mats, the distant chime of a temple bell, the quiet slurping of a noodle vendor on a street corner, the rhythmic splash of water in a meticulously raked garden. These are the sounds that compose the symphony of Edo life, a counterpoint to the dramatic narratives often told. My aim tonight is to be a kind of auditory archaeologist, digging through the layers of time to uncover the quiet echoes of a bygone world. We will explore how people lived, loved, worked, and found meaning within a society where personal freedom was often constrained, but communal harmony was paramount. We'll delve into the unspoken rules of etiquette, the daily routines, the simple pleasures, and even the quiet anxieties that underpin this long period of peace. So, dim the lights, perhaps brew yourself a quiet cup of green tea, and allow your imagination to settle. For the Edo period was not just a time of political stability. It was a grand experiment in social engineering, creating a society where the pursuit of tranquility, both internal and external, became a defining characteristic. Let us listen together, for the quiet life of Edo Japan still has much to tell us, if we only take the time to hear. Join me as we begin our journey into the subtle rhythms of a world defined by its enduring, quiet peace. As we gently step further into the landscape of Edo Japan, the first thing that becomes quietly apparent is the meticulous structure of its society. Far from a chaotic free-for-all, Edo Japan was built upon a rigid, almost unspoken, social hierarchy, meticulously enforced by the Tokugawa shogunate. Understanding this order, and the subtle daily etiquette it engendered, is crucial to comprehending the quiet harmony that largely prevailed for over 2.5 centuries. At the very pinnacle stood the emperor, a spiritual and symbolic figure, but with no real political power. The true ruler was the shogun, the military dictator, who wielded absolute authority from Edo, modern-day Tokyo. Beneath him was the powerful warrior class, the samurai, comprising about 7–10% of the population. Their quiet presence, marked by their distinctive topknots and 2 swords, was a constant reminder of the shogun's authority. For the samurai, life was governed by a strict code of conduct, bushido, emphasizing loyalty, honor, self-discipline, and frugality. Their daily etiquette was precise, from the way they bowed and spoke to their superiors, to the manner in which they carried themselves in public. Imagine the quiet, dignified footsteps of a samurai on a street, the subtle inclination of their head in a respectful greeting, the hushed tones of their conversations. These were the sounds of a class defined by controlled demeanor. Below the samurai were the commoners, divided into three main classes: farmers namen, artisans kagyo, and merchants shonen. This seemingly paradoxical order, placing farmers above artisans and merchants, reflected the Confucian ideal that those who produced the food were most essential to society. However, by the later Edo period, the economic power of merchants, despite their lower official status, grew significantly, creating a quiet tension beneath the surface of the rigid hierarchy. Farmers, comprising over 80% of the population, lived largely in quiet villages, their lives dictated by the relentless rhythms of the agricultural season. Their etiquette was tied to communal living and respect for village elders and authorities. A farmer's quiet deference to a samurai passing through their fields, the soft greetings exchanged between neighbors, the respectful silence when a village leader spoke. These were the sounds of rural social interaction, deeply rooted in tradition. Artisans, residing primarily in urban centers, were skilled craftspeople: carpenters, potters, weavers, sword makers. Their lives were defined by quiet precision and dedication to their craft, and their etiquette often revolved around respect for their masters and adherence to guild rules. The rhythmic tapping of a chisel, the soft whir of a potter's wheel, the quiet concentration in a workshop, these sounds define the artisan's disciplined world. Merchants, despite their growing wealth, were at the bottom of the official social ladder. Yet, they developed their own intricate social codes within their vibrant commercial districts. Their etiquette emphasized trust, reliability, and shrewd negotiation, often conducted with a quiet politeness that masked sharp business acumen. The hushed whispers of a deal being struck in a dimly lit shop, the polite greetings between competitors, the soft clinking of coins exchanged. These were the subtle sounds of commerce. Beyond these four main classes, there were various marginalized groups, including outcasts, hinin and Ada, who performed specific unclean professions like leatherworking or execution. Their existence was largely a quiet one, kept separate from mainstream society, their movements often restricted, their voices rarely heard in the official narratives. Daily etiquette permeated every interaction. Bowing was a fundamental gesture, with the depth and duration of the bow conveying respect. Language itself was hierarchical, with different verb forms and honorifics used depending on the social status of the speaker and listener. Even in the home, a quiet understanding of roles and respect for elders governed family interactions. The soft rustle of sliding doors, the quiet greetings upon entering a room, the gentle placing of items, these were the quiet, pervasive sounds of a society constantly mindful of its social order. This meticulous social structuring and its accompanying etiquette were not merely formalities, they were the very sinews of Edo peace. By clearly defining roles and expectations, they minimized overt conflict and fostered a pervasive sense of order and quiet harmony. It was a world where everyone knew their place, and in that knowing, found a peculiar, enduring tranquility. Having established the quiet framework of Edo society, let us now step inside the walls of a samurai household, a place where the pervasive sense of order and discipline truly found its intimate expression. Far from the battlefield, The samurai of the Edo period were primarily bureaucrats, scholars, and administrators, their lives meticulously regulated by duty, frugality, and a profound emphasis on quiet conduct. The typical samurai residence, whether a grand estate in Edo for a high-ranking lord or a more modest home in a domain capital for a lower-ranking retainer, was designed for both function and contemplation. Made primarily of wood, paper screens, shoji and fusuma, and tatami mats, these homes offered a quiet, minimalist aesthetic. Rooms were multifunctional, shifting from living spaces during the day to bedrooms at night. The sounds within were subdued, the soft sliding of paper doors, the gentle padding of bare feet on tatami, the hushed voices of family members, reflecting the samurai's disciplined demeanor even within their private sphere. A samurai's day began early, often before dawn, with personal ablutions, quiet meditation, and perhaps practice of martial arts. The controlled swish of a wooden sword bakken or the precise movements of a kata. Breakfast was a simple affair, typically rice, miso soup, and pickled vegetables, consumed with quiet dignity. Their diet, reflecting the era's frugality, was designed for sustenance, not indulgence. Much of a samurai's day was devoted to their official duties, whether at the shogun's castle in Edo or at their daimyo's domain office. This involved administrative tasks, record-keeping, policy implementation, and acting as magistrates or civil servants. Their work was precise, methodical, and often involved long hours. The quiet scratching of brushes as documents were prepared, the soft rustle of official papers, the hushed discussions in government offices. These were the sounds of the Edo bureaucracy in action, a quiet engine of the long peace. Within the household, the samurai's wife played a crucial role, managing the household economy, overseeing servants, and raising children. For high-ranking samurai, wives and children often resided permanently in Edo due to the sankinkatai system, making regular family life a fragmented experience. Despite societal restrictions, samurai women were often well-educated, particularly in literature, arts, and household management, and wielded significant, though quiet, influence within their domestic sphere. The gentle rustle of a kimono as a wife moved about the home, the soft hum of domestic chores, the quiet instruction given to children or servants, these defined the sounds of the samurai woman's day. Children in samurai households began their education early. Boys studied Confucian classics, history, literature, calligraphy, and martial arts, preparing them for their future roles. Girls received instruction in household management, etiquette, classical arts like tea ceremony and flower arranging, and sometimes basic literacy. The quiet drone of memorized texts, the careful strokes of calligraphy practice, the disciplined posture during tea ceremony lessons, these were the sounds of a rigorous upbringing, preparing the next generation for lives of service and self-control. Evenings were generally quiet. A samurai might read, practice calligraphy, or engage in quiet conversation with his family. Entertainment was often subdued. Poetry composition, playing games like Go or Shogi, or perhaps listening to the gentle strains of a shamisen played by a family member or a visiting entertainer. Loud revelry was frowned upon, reflecting the emphasis on personal restraint. The soft rustle of turning pages, the gentle click of go stones, the hushed tones of a family discussion, these define the quiet dignity of a samurai evening. The sword, the very symbol of the samurai, was kept in pristine condition, but rarely drawn in anger during the long peace. It was a silent presence, a constant reminder of their heritage and their readiness, yet its quiet sheathed state spoke volumes about the era's tranquility. In essence, life in a samurai household was a meticulously choreographed dance of duty, discipline, and quiet refinement. Every action, every gesture, every sound was attuned to a pervasive sense of order. It was a life lived within strict parameters. Yet within those parameters, the samurai cultivated an inner tranquility and a profound appreciation for the subtle beauty of their existence, contributing to the overall quiet harmony of Edo Japan. From the quiet dignity of the samurai household, let us now venture beyond its walls and immerse ourselves in the vibrant, yet still subtly ordered, hum of the Edo period's urban centers. While agricultural villages comprised the vast majority of Japan, it was in the castle towns, Jakamachi, and most significantly in the shogun's capital of Edo, that the diverse currents of society converged, creating centers of commerce, culture, and yes, a unique kind of urban quietude. Castle towns grew around the residences of the daimyo, feudal lords, and served as their administrative and economic hubs. Their layout was carefully planned. The daimyo's castle at the center, surrounded by samurai residences, and then the districts for artisans and merchants. These towns were a microcosm of the Edo social structure, with clear divisions, yet also constant interaction. The sounds here were a mix. The soft clopping of wooden geta on stone paths, the distant shouts of street vendors, the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith, the quiet murmur of people going about their daily business, a symphony of controlled activity. Edo itself, the shogun's capital, was a metropolis unlike any other. By the 18th century, it had grown to over 1 million inhabitants, making it one of the largest cities in the world. It was a city built largely of wood, making fire a constant, terrifying threat, yet also a city that rebuilt itself with remarkable speed and resilience. Its design reflected the shogunate's meticulous control, a grid pattern in many areas, clear divisions between samurai, merchant, and artisan districts, and a network of canals for transport. The daily rhythm of Edo City began early. Vendors would set up their stalls in the quiet dawn, their hushed calls gradually growing louder as the city awoke. Merchants would open their shops, the sliding wooden doors creaking softly. Artisans would begin their work, the rhythmic sounds of their tools joining the growing urban hum. The city, despite its immense population, maintained a surprising level of order. Crime was relatively low due to strict policing and community-based surveillance systems. Transportation within the city was largely on foot, by palanquin for the wealthy, or by boat along the extensive canal network. The canals, fed by rivers, were crucial for transporting goods like rice, timber, and building materials. Imagine the soft splash of oars, the quiet calls of boatmen, the gentle creak of wooden bridges over waterways. These were the pervasive sounds of urban transport. Edo was a city of constant consumption and entertainment. Food vendors offered everything from soba noodles to tempura from their mobile stalls, their quiet calls drawing hungry customers. Public bathhouses, sento, provided a communal space for hygiene and social interaction, their warm, steamy interiors filled with the murmur of conversations. Markets bustled with activity, though even here, the interactions were often polite and measured. The soft rustle of silks in a kimono shop, the quiet bargaining over fish at a market stall, the gentle splash of water in a bathhouse. These were the sounds of daily commerce and leisure. Despite the growing wealth of the merchant class, ostentatious displays were often discouraged, reflecting the shogunate's emphasis on frugality and social order. However, behind closed doors, and in the licensed pleasure quarters like Yashiwara, a vibrant, floating world. Ukiyo of entertainment and artistic expression quietly flourished, offering a temporary escape from the daily grind. The distant strains of shamisen music, the soft laughter from tea houses, the subtle glow of paper lanterns in the entertainment districts. These were the sounds of Edo's hidden diversions. For the common people, the city offered opportunities that the countryside could not: diverse work, access to goods, and a broader array of cultural experiences. Yet life was still hard, often precarious, and always subject to the shogun's unwavering authority. The quiet footsteps of a busy merchant, the patient work of an artisan, the hushed gossip of neighbors, the rhythmic calls of a street vendor. These were the subtle, enduring sounds of life in the bustling, yet always controlled, castle towns and the grand capital of Edo, a testament to the Tokugawa shogunate's ability to forge a profound and lasting peace, even in its densest urban centers. From the controlled vibrancy of Edo's urban centers, we now turn our gaze to the quiet heartland of Edo Japan, the peasant village. Comprising the vast majority of the population, roughly 80%, the lives of these farmers were inextricably linked to the land and its unforgiving rhythms. Their existence was one of quiet resilience, collective effort, and a profound connection to the cycles of nature, often overlooked in the grand narratives of the shogunate. A typical Edo period village was a close-knit community, often centered around rice paddies, interspersed with humble wooden and thatched-roof homes. The layout was functional, houses clustered together, communal paths leading to fields, and often a small local shrine or temple. The dominant sound of a peasant village was the gentle rhythm of agricultural work, the quiet splash of water in rice paddies, the soft rustle of planting, the rhythmic thud of hoes on earth. These were the sounds of a life utterly dependent on the land. The peasant's day began at dawn, long before the sun fully illuminated the sky. Their lives were dictated by the seasons and the demands of rice cultivation, a labor-intensive process that required year-round effort. Spring meant preparing the paddies and planting seedlings. Summer brought weeding and maintenance under the scorching sun. Autumn was the arduous harvest, and winter, though quieter, involved repairs, tool-making, and preparing for the next cycle. Every family member, from the youngest child to the eldest elder, had a role to play. The quiet cooperation of families in the fields, the soft murmur of instructions passed down generations, the gentle sigh of collective effort, these defined the rural soundscape. Their diet was largely vegetarian and frugal, centering on coarse grains like millet and barley, supplemented by wild greens, roots, and whatever vegetables they could cultivate in small home gardens. Rice, the very crop they grew, was often a luxury reserved for special occasions, as the bulk of it was paid as tax to their lord. Fish, if they lived near a river or coast, provided occasional protein. The quiet gnawing on a piece of dried vegetable, the soft slurping of thin gruel, the hushed sharing of a meager meal, these were the sounds of everyday sustenance, a testament to their enduring hardship. Peasant homes were simple, often single-room structures with earthen floors and thatched roofs, designed for functionality rather than comfort. A central hearth provided warmth for cooking and heating. Family life was close and communal, reflecting the necessity of cooperation for survival. Evenings were quiet, spent mending tools, preparing food for the next day, or engaging in hushed conversation and storytelling around the hearth. The soft crackle of a small fire, the gentle sounds of mending clothes, the quiet lullabies sung to children, these were the intimate sounds of peasant domesticity. While outwardly subservient to the samurai, peasant villages often possessed a strong internal governance structure, led by village elders or headmen who mediated disputes and organized communal labor. There was a quiet understanding of collective responsibility, where the well-being of the individual was inextricably linked to the well-being of the entire community. The hushed deliberations of village meetings, the quiet consensus reached on communal tasks, the soft murmurs of neighbors helping one another, these were the sounds of local self-governance. Religious life was deeply interwoven with their daily existence. Local Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples were centers of communal activity, offering prayers for good harvests and protection from natural disasters or illness. Festivals, matsuri, as we will explore later, provided vital breaks from labor, allowing for communal celebration and spiritual renewal. The distant ringing of a temple bell, the soft chanting at a village shrine, the quiet gratitude whispered after a successful harvest, these were the spiritual anchors of their lives. Despite the hardships, heavy taxes, vulnerability to famine, and the strict control of the samurai, the peasants of Edo Japan displayed remarkable resilience and patience. Their lives were defined by a quiet dignity, a profound connection to the land, and an unwavering commitment to the cycles of planting and harvest. The enduring peace of the Edo period was built upon the silent, tireless labor of these millions, whose quiet lives, day after day, sustained the entire nation. Their legacy is etched not in grand monuments, but in the enduring landscape of Japan itself. From the quiet, cyclical rhythms of the peasant village, let us now turn to a class that, despite its officially low social standing, quietly gained immense economic power and subtly reshaped the Edo period: the merchant class. Their world was the bustling, yet still orderly urban centers, where commerce, innovation, and a pragmatic pursuit of profit created a distinct and increasingly influential segment of society. The Tokugawa social hierarchy, based on Confucian ideals, placed merchants, shonen, at the very bottom, beneath samurai, farmers, and artisans. They were seen as unproductive, merely moving goods that others produced. However, the long peace of the Edo period created an unprecedented demand for goods and services. With the samurai largely confined to administrative roles and the daimyo undertaking expensive Sankinkatai processions, a money-based economy flourished, and merchants became its indispensable facilitators. Merchant life revolved around trade, finance, and distribution. From small shopkeepers selling everyday necessities to powerful wholesalers dealing in rice, sake, or textiles, their networks extended across the country, often utilizing the very highways we will explore later. Their daily work involved meticulous record-keeping, careful negotiation, and a deep understanding of market demand. Imagine the quiet click of an abacus soroban in a dimly lit shop, the hushed discussions of prices and deliveries, the soft rustle of ledger books being updated. These were the sounds of Edo commerce, a methodical pursuit of profit. Their homes and shops were often integrated, with the storefront on the ground level and living quarters above or behind. While their public display of wealth was often restrained to avoid attracting the attention of authorities, many successful merchants lived in considerable comfort, enjoying fine food, clothing, and access to the burgeoning entertainment districts. The soft rustle of fine silk worn by a merchant's wife, the quiet clinking of delicate ceramics during a private meal, the subtle glow of paper lanterns in their well-appointed living spaces, these were the sounds of a quiet prosperity. The economic innovations of the merchant class were profound. They developed sophisticated financial instruments, including bills of exchange and rudimentary banking systems, allowing for large-scale transactions without physically transporting vast quantities of coin. They established widespread distribution networks, connecting producers in the countryside with consumers in the growing cities. The quiet yet steady flow of goods, coordinated by these merchants, underpinned the stability of the entire national economy. Edo, Osaka, and Kyoto became major commercial hubs. Osaka, in particular, was known as the nation's kitchen, Tenka no Deidokoro, due to its role as a central rice market and trading hub. Here, vast quantities of rice from the domains were bought and sold, fueling the urban populations and the samurai stipends. The hushed negotiations in rice exchanges, the soft rustle of rice sacks being tallied, the distant sounds of ships arriving with cargo, these were the acoustic markers of a thriving mercantile system. Education for merchant children, while less formalized than for samurai, was highly practical and widespread. Terracotta temple schools taught reading, writing, and arithmetic using the soroban, skills essential for business. Merchant sons would often apprentice in their family businesses or with other merchants, learning the trade hands-on. The quiet drone of children reciting multiplication tables, the patient instruction from a master merchant to his apprentice, the soft tapping of the soroban beads, these were the sounds of a class equipping itself for economic success. Despite their economic power, merchants generally avoided direct political involvement, preferring to operate discreetly within the system. They often patronized the arts, particularly kabuki theater and ukiyo-e prints, which reflected their urban tastes and provided an outlet for their wealth in ways that didn't overtly challenge the samurai's authority. The quiet enjoyment of a play, the subtle appreciation of a newly acquired print, the hushed conversations in a pleasure house, these were the diversions of the burgeoning merchant class. The quiet revolution initiated by the merchant class eventually created cracks in the rigid feudal system. Their increasing wealth contrasted sharply with the samurai's fixed, often dwindling, stipends, leading to financial strain for the warrior class. This subtle shift in economic power, though rarely expressed overtly, was a significant underlying force that contributed to the eventual decline of the shogunate. In essence, the Edo period merchant class, though operating with quiet discretion, was a powerful engine of change. Their ingenuity, their industriousness, and their pragmatic approach to life created a dynamic urban economy that quietly reshaped Japanese society. The soft clinking of coins, the hushed agreements in bustling markets, and the steady flow of goods across the land. These were the subtle yet profound sounds of a class that, despite its low standing, quietly held the purse strings of an entire nation at peace. Beneath the surface of Edo Japan's long peace and meticulously ordered society lay a system of justice that, to modern sensibilities, would appear profoundly harsh and often brutal. While the shogunate aimed for stability and control, the mechanisms for achieving this were rooted in a pragmatic, sometimes unforgiving approach to law and order. Understanding these quiet yet severe realities allows us to appreciate the delicate balance of fear and obedience that maintained the tranquility of the era. The legal system of the Edo period was not based on abstract rights or legal precedents in the way Western systems developed. Instead, it was fundamentally hierarchical and focused on maintaining the status quo and the social order, with a strong emphasis on collective responsibility. Justice was administered at various levels: by the shogunate's own magistrates, Bugyo in Edo, by the daimyo in their domains, and at the most local level, by village headmen or town elders. There was no clear separation of powers. The same officials who administered the government often also served as judges and law enforcers. This concentration of authority meant that justice could be swift, but also highly dependent on the discretion of the ruling official. Crime, in the eyes of Edo law, was not just an offense against an individual. It was an offense against the social order and, by extension, against the shogun himself. Therefore, even seemingly minor transgressions could be met with surprisingly severe penalties, particularly if the offender was a commoner and the victim was of a higher class. For instance, theft, especially of food, was a significant concern in a society where sustenance was often precarious. While minor theft might result in public shaming or a severe beating, repeated offenses or large-scale theft could lead to mutilation or even execution. The underlying principle was deterrence. Punishment was often public and designed to instill fear and obedience in the populace. One of the most chilling aspects of Edo justice was the use of torture to extract confessions. While officially reserved for those strongly suspected of grave crimes, it was a common and accepted practice. Methods ranged from the ishidaki, piling stones on the legs, to more agonizing techniques involving ropes and stretching. The rationale was that an accused person, if truly innocent, would not confess under torture. A confession, even one coerced, was usually required for conviction. Imagine the quiet dread that would spread through a community if someone were taken for questioning, knowing the methods that might be employed behind closed doors. The silent screams that went unheard, the unyielding pressure applied to extract a truth, or a convenient untruth, were a grim undercurrent to the period's calm facade. Punishments varied widely depending on the severity of the crime, the social status of both offender and victim, and the specific domain. For samurai, dishonor was often a more severe punishment than physical pain. Lesser offenses might result in house arrest or confiscation of stipend. Grave offenses, however, could lead to seppuku, ritual suicide, which allowed the samurai to die with honor rather than face public execution. For commoners, the range of punishments was more brutal. Corporal punishment, such as flogging, was common for minor infractions. For more serious crimes, mutilation, such as cutting off fingers or ears, was used as a permanent mark of disgrace and a warning to others. The most severe penalty was execution, which was often carried out publicly to maximize its deterrent effect. Methods of execution included beheading, crucifixion, and even burning at the stake for crimes like arson or plotting rebellion. These spectacles were grim reminders of the shogun's absolute power and the consequences of challenging the established order. The execution grounds were often located on the outskirts of towns, places to be avoided, yet they served their purpose as a silent, chilling sermon against deviance. Imagine the hushed whispers, the averted gazes, the palpable tension in the air as a crowd gathered, driven by a morbid curiosity and a reinforcement of their own good behavior. The sharp descent of a blade, the collective gasp, and then the return to a quiet, fearful normality. Beyond direct punishment, the system also employed various forms of social control and surveillance. Village and neighborhood associations were responsible for monitoring their members, and collective responsibility was a key principle. If one member of a 5-person group, goningumi, committed a crime, the entire group could be held accountable. This system fostered an environment where individuals watched over each other, not just out of concern, but out of a pragmatic need to avoid collective punishment. Whispers of dissent or unusual behavior could quickly lead to investigation, ensuring that potential threats to stability were identified and neutralized before they could escalate. While the Edo period is celebrated for its enduring peace, it was a peace often enforced through a clear demonstration of authority and the threat of severe, uncompromising justice. The quiet daily lives we have been exploring unfolded against a backdrop where transgression carried a heavy price, and where the mechanisms of law and order were designed not for rehabilitation, but for maintaining absolute control. The distant sound of a prison gate closing, the soft murmur of a village elder's judgment, the chilling silence that followed a public pronouncement of guilt. These were the subtle, yet potent, reminders of the iron fist beneath the velvet glove of Edo tranquility. Having considered the stern hand of Edo justice, let us now turn our attention to another fundamental aspect of human existence that often reveals the true conditions of a society: its approach to health, illness, and healing. Edo period healthcare, while rooted in centuries of tradition, also saw the subtle introduction of new ideas. It was a world where disease was often mysterious, treatments could be painful or ineffective, and the quiet anxieties surrounding health were a constant companion for rich and poor alike. The dominant medical philosophy in Edo Japan was a blend of traditional Chinese medicine, known as Kanpo, and indigenous Japanese practices. Kanpo was based on the concept of balancing vital energies, kai, and regulating the flow of bodily fluids. Diagnosis often involved pulse reading, observation of the tongue, and careful questioning about symptoms and lifestyle. Treatments typically included herbal remedies, acupuncture, moxibustion, the burning of dried mugwort on the skin, and dietary adjustments. Imagine the quiet, methodical process of a Kanpo doctor examining a patient, perhaps in a dimly lit room, the air thick with the scent of various dried herbs. The soft rustle of their robes, the gentle tap of their fingers on a wrist for a pulse, the hushed pronouncements of their diagnosis. These were the sounds of traditional healing. Herbal medicine was the cornerstone of Kanpo. Hundreds of different plants, minerals, and animal products were used to create intricate prescriptions, often brewed into bitter decoctions. These remedies were painstakingly prepared, with precise measurements and boiling times, reflecting a deep, inherited knowledge of the natural world. For many common ailments, fevers, digestive issues, minor injuries, these herbal treatments were often the first and only line of defense. The quiet grinding of a pestle in a mortar, the subtle aroma of boiling herbs on a low flame, the patient waiting for a remedy to brew, these were the domestic sounds of self-care and traditional healing in the household. While Kanpo focused on internal balance, physical ailments and injuries were also addressed, though often with methods that seem crude to modern eyes. Surgery was rare and highly dangerous due to the lack of anesthetics and understanding of antiseptics. Amputations, when necessary, were agonizing procedures performed out of desperation. Bone setting for fractures was practiced by specialists, often blending practical skill with traditional spiritual beliefs. Wound care involved cleansing with various liquids and applying poultices made from herbs. The quiet, concentrated effort of a bone setter, the muffled cries of pain, the careful wrapping of bandages, these were the sounds of physical intervention. One fascinating, though limited, development during the Edo period was the introduction of rangaku, or Dutch learning. Despite Japan's strict isolationist policy, sakoku, the Dutch were permitted a small trading post on Dejima Island in Nagasaki. Through this narrow window, Japanese scholars and doctors gained access to European scientific and medical texts, albeit often translated from Dutch. These texts introduced concepts like Western anatomy, surgery, and a more empirical approach to disease. The most famous example is Sujita Genpaku's Kai Shinsho, New Book of Anatomy, published in 1774, which was a translation of a Dutch anatomical text. The realization that Western anatomical drawings were far more accurate than traditional Chinese ones was a quiet revolution for a small circle of dedicated scholars. Imagine the hushed excitement of these scholars, poring over forbidden texts by the dim light of a lamp, comparing diagrams, and slowly, painstakingly, translating alien concepts into Japanese. The soft rustle of pages, the scratching of brushes, the quiet exclamations of discovery, these were the sounds of forbidden knowledge slowly seeping in. Despite these intellectual advances, practical healthcare for the majority remained rudimentary. Sanitation was generally poor, especially in crowded urban areas, contributing to the spread of infectious diseases. While clean water sources existed, waste disposal was often inadequate. Epidemics such as smallpox, measles, and influenza periodically swept through the population, claiming countless lives, particularly among children. There was little understanding of contagion, and isolation was the primary, often ineffective, method of containment. The hushed fear during an epidemic, the quiet, mournful cries of grieving families, the solemn procession of bodies, these were the grim sounds of widespread suffering. Mental health, too, was understood through a lens very different from our own. Conditions that might today be diagnosed as depression or anxiety were often attributed to imbalances of kai, spiritual disturbances, or even demonic possession. Treatments could range from herbal remedies and acupuncture to more spiritual interventions by priests or exorcists. Those with severe mental illness might be cared for by their families, ostracized, or, in extreme cases, confined. The quiet desperation of families struggling with unseen afflictions, the murmur of prayers, the solemn rituals intended to cleanse or appease, these were the sounds of a different approach to the troubled mind. Access to professional medical care varied greatly. While samurai and wealthy merchants might afford a visit from a skilled doctor, most peasants relied on self-medication, folk remedies passed down through generations, or the limited services of village healers who might combine traditional medicine with shamanistic practices. Childbirth, too, was a dangerous affair, often attended by village midwives with practical experience but little formal medical training. Maternal and infant mortality rates were high, a stark reminder of the fragility of life. The soft moans of a woman in labor, the hushed instructions of a midwife, the quiet anxiety of waiting family members, these were the sounds of birth in an era without modern medical intervention. Edo period healthcare, therefore, was a quiet struggle against the unpredictable forces of illness and injury. It was a world where quiet suffering was common, where traditional wisdom often provided comfort more than cure, and where radical new ideas from afar stirred only a quiet ripple in the vast ocean of established practice. The enduring resilience of the Edo people was not just in their ability to work, but also in their quiet determination to heal and to simply endure the afflictions of the body and mind, year after year, century after century, under the tranquil and unchanging sky of feudal Japan. Having explored the structured lives of samurai, the industrious hum of castle towns, the quiet grind of peasant life, and the rudimentary state of healthcare, Let us now turn our attention to a facet of Edo society that, while seemingly glamorous, was underpinned by its own strict rules and often harsh realities. The world of the geisha. Far from being mere courtesans, geisha were highly trained entertainers and artists. There lives a meticulous performance of tradition, beauty, and subtle influence. Yet, beneath the layers of silk and white makeup lay a demanding existence, shaped by rigorous discipline and economic necessity. The term geisha literally translates to artist or person of the arts. Their role was to provide sophisticated entertainment, primarily to wealthy patrons, samurai, merchants, and other influential figures. This entertainment included classical Japanese music, dance, poetry, and engaging conversation. They were, in essence, living embodiments of traditional Japanese culture, meticulously trained in various disciplines from a young age. Their world was typically confined to specific districts within the major cities, known as Hanamachi or flower towns, with Kyoto's Jin and Edo's Yashiwara being among the most famous. These districts were highly regulated, a contained ecosystem of artistry and entertainment. The path to becoming a geisha was long and arduous, beginning in early childhood. Girls, sometimes sold by impoverished families or orphans, would enter an akiya or geisha house as shikomi, apprentices. Their early years were dedicated to the most mundane and grueling chores: cleaning, running errands, serving the established geisha, and observing everything. This period was one of quiet subservience, testing their discipline and commitment. Imagine the quiet clatter of dishes being washed, the soft sweep of a broom across tatami mats, the hushed instructions given by older geisha. These were the background sounds of a shikomi's life, a world of constant learning and silent observation. As they grew older, typically around age 10-14, if they showed promise, they would progress to become minarai or meiko in Kyoto, a more formalized apprentice role. This stage marked the true beginning of their artistic training. Hours upon hours were spent practicing traditional instruments like the shamisen, a 3-stringed lute, the kodo, a 13-stringed zither, and the fu bamboo flute. Dance lessons were equally rigorous, demanding grace, precision, and the ability to convey complex emotions through subtle movements. Calligraphy, poetry, and the art of conversation were also essential. The sounds of this training were rhythmic and repetitive. The soft plucking of shamisen strings, the gentle tapping of fan against floor in dance practice, the quiet murmuring of poems being memorized. This intense dedication, often lasting for many years, shaped them into the refined entertainers that patrons expected. The distinct appearance of a geisha was itself a work of art and a testament to the hours of preparation involved. The iconic white makeup, known as ashiroi, was painstakingly applied, creating a mask-like effect that emphasized their eyes and lips. Elaborate kimonos, often made of fine silk and adorned with intricate patterns, were heavy and restrictive, yet worn with an effortless grace. Their hairstyles, particularly for meiko, were complex and required specialized techniques, often involving the use of stiffening waxes and pins, and could only be slept on a raised neck support to preserve their shape. This transformation was not about personal vanity, but about becoming an idealized figure of beauty and artistry, a living canvas for traditional aesthetics. Imagine the quiet rustle of silk, the soft application of powders, the patient stillness required during the hours of preparation. These were the unseen moments before a geisha's public appearance. Once a geisha was established, her daily life revolved around engagements at acha or tea houses, where she would entertain clients. These were not public performances but intimate gatherings where the geisha's skills in conversation, music, and dance created a refined atmosphere. While there was often an unspoken flirtation, the primary expectation was intellectual and artistic companionship, not sexual favors. The soft strumming of a shamisen, the gentle murmur of polite conversation, the quiet laughter, the delicate clinking of sake cups, these were the sounds of the geisha's working hours, a world of subtle charm and cultivated grace. However, the geisha's seemingly glamorous life was not without its shadows. They were, in essence, indentured servants to their akiya, their training and living expenses covered by the house, which they were expected to repay through their earnings. This debt could take many years to clear, and until it was, their lives were largely controlled by the akasen, mother of the house. Personal freedom was limited. While not all geisha sought out a dana, a wealthy patron who provided financial support, for many, it offered a degree of financial security and a path out of constant debt. The life was one of constant public scrutiny, maintaining an immaculate image and suppressing personal feelings in favor of professionalism. The quiet pressure to always be graceful, to always be entertaining, to never show true fatigue or personal hardship. This was the unseen burden carried by many geisha. For some, particularly in districts like Yashiwara, the line between geisha and warin, high-ranking courtesans, could blur, or some geisha might transition into courtesan roles if their skills did not bring enough income. While traditionally distinct, the economic realities sometimes forced difficult choices. Yet, at their core, geisha remained artists, their existence a testament to the Edo period's deep appreciation for aesthetics, discipline, and the quiet cultivation of human artistry. Their world, with its strict hierarchies and unseen struggles, nevertheless contributed a unique and beautiful thread to the rich tapestry of Edo Japan's long, tranquil, and sometimes somber story. Following our quiet exploration of the geisha's meticulously crafted world, let us now broaden our gaze to the entirety of Edo Japan's urban diversions, often encapsulated by the evocative term ukiyo, or the floating world. This was a realm distinct from the rigid social order of the samurai and the arduous toil of the peasants, a vibrant, ephemeral space where commoners, especially wealthy merchants and artisans, could find respite, entertainment, and a fleeting escape from the strictures of daily life. The floating world was a kaleidoscope of transient pleasures, designed to be enjoyed in the moment, much like a fleeting blossom or a passing boat on a river. The heart of the ukiyo lay in the licensed pleasure quarters and entertainment districts of major cities like Edo, Yashiwara, Kyoto, Shimabara, and Osaka, Shinmachi. These were not simply places of leisure. They were carefully controlled and highly regulated zones, fenced off from the rest of the city, with specific gates and rules of entry. This segregation was a deliberate policy by the shogunate to contain potential disruptions to social order, allowing commoners to indulge their desires without impacting the stability of the larger society. Imagine stepping through a grand gate, leaving behind the quiet, orderly streets, and entering a realm alive with the soft glow of paper lanterns, the distant strum of a shamisen, and the murmur of countless conversations. It was a sensory experience, designed to enchant and distract. Perhaps the most iconic form of entertainment in the floating world was kabuki theater. Originating from eccentric dance forms, kabuki evolved into a highly stylized dramatic art form known for its elaborate costumes, exaggerated makeup, kumadori, dramatic poses, and spectacular stage effects. The plays often depicted historical events, moral dilemmas, or tales of love and revenge, always with a flair for the dramatic. Audiences would spend an entire day at the theater, bringing their own food and drink, engaging in lively chatter, and shouting encouragement to their favorite actors. The sounds of kabuki were vibrant and diverse. The rhythmic clack of wooden blocks, hayashigi, announcing the start of a performance, the distinctive twang of the shamisen, the booming voices of actors, and the excited shouts of the audience. It was a communal, immersive experience, a momentary escape into a world of heightened emotion and spectacle. Beyond kabuki, sumo wrestling held immense popularity. These grand tournaments, initially religious rituals, evolved into major public spectacles. Huge, powerful wrestlers known as rikishi engaged in bouts within a sacred ring, embodying strength, discipline, and tradition. The anticipation of each match, the ritualistic salt throwing, the clashes of immense bodies, and the roar of the crowd as a winner was declared. These were the sounds that captivated thousands. Sumo was not just a sport. It was a deeply ingrained cultural event, celebrating the spirit of resilience and raw power. For a quieter form of entertainment, many would visit tea houses, not just for the formal tea ceremony, but for a more relaxed atmosphere where they could enjoy sake, light refreshments, and conversation, often in the company of geisha, as we discussed. Other diversions included visiting temples and shrines during festivals, enjoying cherry blossom viewing, hanami, or autumn leaf viewing, mamajigari parties, and indulging in games like go or shogi in specialized establishments. These activities offered a more genteel form of leisure, allowing for social interaction and aesthetic appreciation. The soft murmur of conversation over a cup of sake, the distant laughter from a nearby game, the rustle of leaves in a quiet garden, these were the sounds of gentle recreation. A critical component of the floating world was the art form it inspired, ukiyo-e, or pictures of the floating world. These woodblock prints depicted the actors, courtesans, geisha, sumo wrestlers, and landscapes of this transient urban realm. They were affordable and widely distributed, serving as a kind of popular media, advertising, and artistic expression all at once. Imagine the quiet, methodical work of the ukiyo-e artist, sketching the scenes, and the meticulous process of the carver and printer, carefully applying each color block to paper. The subtle rustle of paper, the gentle pressure of the barren tool, these were the sounds of capturing the fleeting moments of the floating world for posterity, a quiet rebellion against the transient nature of their subject. While the floating world offered freedom, it also held its own unspoken dangers. Debt could accumulate quickly for those who overindulged. Disease, particularly sexually transmitted infections, was a constant threat, often leading to disfigurement or death. For the women working in the pleasure quarters, including warren and lower-ranking courtesans, their lives were often far from glamorous, marked by strict contracts, economic exploitation, and a constant pressure to entertain. Their smiles, though captivating, often concealed deep weariness and personal hardship. The forced gaiety, the hushed whispers of desperation, the quiet tears shed in solitude, these were the unseen sounds behind the shimmering facade. Yet, despite its inherent contradictions and often hidden hardships, the floating world was an indispensable part of Edo life. It provided an essential outlet for the common people, a space where strict social hierarchies could be momentarily relaxed, and where artistry and pleasure reigned supreme. It was a testament to the human need for escape, for beauty, and for moments of unburdened enjoyment, however transient they might be. The distant echoes of kabuki drums, the soft laughter from a tea house, the gentle swish of kimonos in the night. These were the sounds that drifted from the floating world, a quiet counterpoint to the rigid order that governed the rest of Edo Japan, beckoning those who sought a temporary reprieve from the sober realities of their lives. As we drift through the tranquil tapestry of Edo Japan, it's crucial to remember that even in a society governed by strict logic and order, the unseen world of spirits, superstitions, and folklore held a powerful sway over the minds of its people. From the highest samurai to the lowest peasant, the belief in kami deities, yakai, supernatural monsters or spirits, and the efficacy of charms and rituals was deeply ingrained, shaping daily decisions and providing a framework for understanding the unpredictable forces of nature and fate. These quiet beliefs permeated every aspect of life, offering both comfort and a subtle undercurrent of fear. The natural world itself was seen as imbued with spirits. Every ancient tree, every prominent rock, every flowing river or towering mountain could be home to a kami. Shinto, Japan's indigenous religion, emphasized the reverence for these spirits and the purity of nature. Villagers would often perform small rituals at local shrines, offering simple prayers for a good harvest, protection from illness, or safe travels. The quiet rustle of leaves in a sacred grove, the gentle clinking of offering coins at a shrine, the soft murmur of prayers whispered before a small torii gate. These were the sounds of a constant, respectful dialogue with the unseen forces of the land. It was a humble, personal faith, deeply tied to the rhythms of daily existence. Beyond the benevolent kami, there was the vast and often unsettling realm of yakai. These were not always malicious, but they were certainly beyond human comprehension, capable of mischief, trickery, or even profound danger. Tales of shape-shifting foxes, kitsune, who could deceive humans, mischievous raccoon dogs, tanuki, with magical powers, or the vengeful spirits of the departed yurei, were passed down through generations, told around hearths in peasant homes and whispered in the inner chambers of samurai mansions. These stories served not just as entertainment during long evenings, but also as moral lessons, warnings, and explanations for inexplicable phenomena. Imagine the hushed tones of a storyteller, the quiet gasps of children, the subtle chill that might run down one's spine as a tale of a ghostly encounter unfolded by the flickering light of a paper lantern. Specific superstitions governed many aspects of daily life. For instance, certain days were considered auspicious or inauspicious for travel, marriage, or starting a new venture. Breaking a mirror was believed to bring bad luck, just as seeing a black cat might portend misfortune. Simple charms and talismans were commonly used for protection. Farmers might place special offerings in their fields to ensure a bountiful harvest, while merchants might hang specific symbols in their shops to attract wealth. Even the arrangement of a home, guided by principles similar to feng shui, was believed to influence the flow of good fortune. The quiet act of hanging a protective charm, the solemnity of placing an offering, the subtle rearrangement of household items, these were the daily rituals of appeasing the unseen and inviting good luck. Dreams held particular significance. They were often interpreted as omens, messages from the spirit world, or glimpses into the future. A dream of Mount Fuji, a hawk and an eggplant, for example, was considered particularly auspicious. Illness, as we touched upon, was sometimes attributed to spiritual causes, requiring not just herbal remedies but also prayers, exorcisms, or visits to temples for spiritual cleansing. The quiet desperation of families seeking spiritual intervention, the rhythmic chanting of a priest, the solemn burning of incense, these were the sounds of confronting unseen afflictions. Belief in omens and prophecies was also common, especially during times of uncertainty, though the Edo period stability reduced widespread anxieties. Unusual natural phenomena, like comets or eclipses, were often interpreted as signs from the heavens, portending either good or ill fortune for the shogunate or the nation. While such beliefs might seem irrational to modern scientific minds, they provided a framework for understanding a world not yet explained by scientific inquiry, offering a sense of control, or at least predictability, in the face of the unknown. For the common people, particularly in rural areas, local deities Dazokushin were intimately connected with their daily lives. They might pray to the Kappa, a mischievous water spirit, for protection by a river, or make offerings to mountain spirits before embarking on a journey. Roadside shrines, often adorned with small stones or offerings, marked paths and protected travelers. These localized beliefs reinforced communal bonds and provided a tangible connection to the spiritual landscape of their immediate surroundings. The gentle tolling of a local temple bell, the soft rustle of prayer flags, the quiet footsteps of pilgrims, these sounds marked the spiritual landscape of Edo Japan. Even the daimyo and the samurai, despite their adherence to Confucian principles of rational governance, were not immune to these beliefs. Many had personal shrines within their homes or patronized specific temples and shrines, seeking blessings for their families and their lord. They might consult astrologers or diviners for important decisions, or adhere to auspicious days for certain activities. The quiet murmur of a samurai performing a personal ritual, the solemnity of a visit to a family temple, the soft sound of a fortune teller's shuffling cards. These demonstrated that even the most powerful understood the quiet influence of the unseen. The quiet, enduring presence of superstitions and folk beliefs in Edo Japan highlights a fundamental human need to make sense of the world, to seek comfort in tradition, and to acknowledge forces beyond the purely rational. These quiet beliefs, woven into the fabric of daily life, offered explanations for the unexplainable, comfort in times of fear, and a shared understanding of a world both seen and unseen. They were the gentle whispers of an ancient past, lingering even in a time of structured modernity, guiding the subtle movements of daily life under the tranquil gaze of the Tokugawa shogunate. Building upon our exploration of the folk beliefs and spiritual anxieties that quietly shaped Edo life, let us now delve into the more formalized religious practices that deeply permeated the society: Buddhism and Shinto. These two distinct yet often interwoven traditions provided not just spiritual guidance, but also played crucial roles in the shogunate's system of control, in the rhythms of daily life, and in marking the significant passages from birth to death. The quiet reverence for the sacred, whether in grand temples or humble shrines, was a constant backdrop to the tranquil era. Shinto, as we briefly touched upon, is Japan's indigenous religion, centered on the worship of kami, the diverse deities and spirits that inhabit natural objects, places, and ancestral figures. During the Edo period, Shinto practices remained deeply local and communal. Every village had its own tutelary kami, enshrined in a local shrine, often a simple structure made of wood and paper. Villagers would visit these shrines to offer prayers for good harvests, safe journeys, and the general well-being of their community. Seasonal festivals, matsuri, often vibrant and lively, were intimately tied to these shrines, celebrating the blessings of the kami and reinforcing communal bonds. Imagine the quiet approach to a small, moss-covered shrine nestled amidst ancient trees, the gentle tinkle of a bell as a worshiper pulled a rope, the soft clapping of hands before a moment of silent prayer. These were the subtle sounds of everyday Shinto devotion, a connection to the timeless spirit of the land. Buddhism, on the other hand, had arrived in Japan centuries earlier from the Asian continent and had deeply rooted itself, often blending with indigenous Shinto beliefs. During the Edo period, the shogunate adopted a policy known as the teryukuseido, or temple registration system. This was not merely a religious policy, but a critical tool for social and political control. Every household in Japan was required to register with a local Buddhist temple, effectively becoming a parishioner. This system was initially designed to eradicate Christianity, which the shogunate viewed as a destabilizing foreign influence. However, it evolved into a comprehensive census and surveillance mechanism. Temples kept meticulous records of births, deaths, and marriages, and were responsible for confirming the non-Christian status of their parishioners. Imagine the quiet, methodical process of monks meticulously updating scrolls, their brushes softly scratching against the paper, while outside, the gentle ringing of a temple bell marked the passage of time. This meant that Buddhist temples became central to the daily lives of the common people. While many practiced their faith sincerely, the temple registration also meant a bureaucratic relationship with the institution. Funerals, memorial services, and ancestor worship were almost exclusively conducted by Buddhist priests. The concept of bodhi, or enlightenment, and the cycle of reincarnation were core tenets that offered solace and meaning to many lives, particularly in the face of hardship and death. The serene atmosphere of a Buddhist temple, the soft chanting of sutras, the gentle rhythm of wooden clappers, the subtle aroma of incense drifting through the air. These were the pervasive sounds that accompanied the Buddhist faith. For families, the domestic Buddhist altar, or butsudan, was a sacred space within the home. Here, ancestors were honored with daily offerings of rice, tea, and water, and prayers were offered for their peaceful repose and for the well-being of the living family. It was a quiet, private ritual, reinforcing family ties and the continuity of generations. The soft click of offering bowls, the quiet murmur of a family member reciting a prayer, the gentle glow of a small lamp. These were the intimate sounds of daily devotion within the home, a quiet bridge between the living and the dead. Pilgrimages to famous temples and shrines were also popular, offering a rare opportunity for travel and spiritual merit. People from all walks of life, from merchants to farmers, would embark on these quiet journeys, sometimes alone, sometimes in small groups, enduring hardships for the promise of spiritual purification or a specific blessing. The quiet shuffling of sandaled feet on dusty roads, the rhythmic tapping of a pilgrim's staff, the distant chanting of fellow travelers. These were the sounds of a spiritual quest, a break from the daily routine in search of quiet enlightenment or good fortune. Monasteries and hermitages, often nestled in remote mountains, provided a quiet refuge for those seeking a more ascetic or contemplative life. Here, monks and nuns engaged in rigorous meditation, scriptural study, and physical labor, striving for spiritual awakening. Their lives were defined by silence, discipline, and devotion, a stark contrast to the bustle of urban centers. The deep, resonant thrum of a great temple drum, the quiet rustle of robes during walking meditation, the profound silence broken only by the chirping of cicadas. These were the sounds of intense spiritual practice, a pursuit of tranquility in a world already striving for quietude. Confucianism, though not a religion in the traditional sense, also profoundly influenced Edo society, particularly among the samurai. It provided an ethical and moral framework, emphasizing filial piety, loyalty, righteousness, and hierarchical social order. While not practiced with rituals in the same way as Shinto or Buddhism, its principles quietly guided governance, education, and social conduct, promoting harmony and stability. The quiet study of classic texts, the hushed discussions of moral philosophy, the careful adherence to etiquette, these were the subtle manifestations of Confucian influence. In sum, the religious landscape of Edo Japan was a complex tapestry of native Shinto beliefs, deeply embedded Buddhism, and the pervasive ethical framework of Confucianism. These traditions, sometimes blending, sometimes distinct, provided meaning, communal identity, and a quiet sense of order to the lives of millions. They shaped rituals from the cradle to the grave, reinforced social structures, and offered spiritual solace in a world of both beauty and hardship. The quiet hum of devotion, whether public or private, was an integral part of the tranquil rhythm of life under the Tokugawa shogunate. Having explored the spiritual and leisure dimensions of Edo life, let us now turn our attention to the quiet but profound evolution of knowledge and learning that occurred during this period of unprecedented peace. While often seen as a closed society, Edo Japan experienced a remarkable blossoming of education and literacy, reaching far beyond the elite samurai class and subtly shaping the cultural and intellectual landscape for centuries. This quiet pursuit of knowledge, in various forms, underpinned the era's stability and prepared the ground for future transformations. For the samurai, education was not merely an option but a core requirement of their class. With their roles shifting from warriors to bureaucrats, intellectual prowess became as vital as martial skill. Their curriculum was broad, encompassing the Confucian classics, which provided the moral and ethical framework for governance and personal conduct. They studied history, literature, poetry, and calligraphy, alongside military strategy and martial arts. Education for samurai boys typically began at home with private tutors or in domain-run schools, hangako. These schools emphasized discipline, memorization, and scholarly debate. Imagine the quiet scratching of brushes on paper as young samurai diligently copied texts, the hushed recitations of classical poems, the solemn debates among older students. These were the sounds of formal samurai education, a rigorous training of both mind and character. While Confucianism was central, Rangaku or Dutch learning, as previously discussed in the context of medicine, also represented a quiet but significant intellectual current. Through the limited contact with the Dutch in Nagasaki, a small but dedicated group of scholars translated European scientific, medical, and astronomical texts. This pursuit of Western knowledge, though officially restricted, represented a profound intellectual curiosity that chipped away at the edges of Japan's self-imposed isolation. The quiet excitement of these clandestine studies, the diligent translation work, the subtle sharing of forbidden knowledge, these were the sounds of intellectual daring. For the common people, the merchants, artisans, and even some prosperous peasants, access to education also expanded significantly. This was primarily through terakoya, or temple schools, which were private educational institutions usually run by Buddhist priests, samurai who had left service, or even ordinary citizens with some learning. Unlike the formal domain schools, Terakoya were open to children of all social classes, girls included, although attendance varied. Their curriculum was highly practical, focusing on the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic using the abacus saraben. Students learned basic kana and kanji characters, how to write letters and documents, and how to perform calculations essential for commerce and household management. Imagine the quiet drone of children reciting lessons in unison, the soft click-clack of saraben beads, the gentle rustle of paper as they practiced calligraphy. These were the ubiquitous sounds of widespread literacy quietly taking root across Japan. The proliferation of Terakoya led to an exceptionally high literacy rate for the time, arguably one of the highest in the world during the Edo period. This high literacy among commoners was a silent driver of the era's cultural dynamism. It allowed for the widespread dissemination of popular literature, including travel guides, instructional manuals, and the rise of commercial publishing. Woodblock prints ukiyo-e, which were often accompanied by text, also served as a form of visual and textual education. The quiet turning of pages in a printed book, the soft murmur of someone reading aloud, the careful deciphering of characters on a scroll, these were daily occurrences for many Edo citizens. Beyond formal schooling, informal learning was pervasive. Apprenticeships in artisanal crafts and merchant houses were essentially vocational training systems, passing down specialized knowledge and skills from master to apprentice over many years. This was learning by doing, a hands-on education in the quiet rhythm of the workshop or storefront. The patient guidance of a master, the careful imitation by an apprentice, the soft tapping of tools, these were the sounds of practical knowledge being transferred. Traveling scholars, storytellers, and itinerant performers also played a role in disseminating information and cultural narratives. Local temples and shrines often served as centers for communal learning, hosting lectures, storytelling sessions, and providing access to texts. The quiet rustle of a scholar's robe as he unrolls a scroll for a public reading, the hushed attention of a crowd listening to an ancient tale, the soft murmur of explanations, these were the sounds of knowledge shared beyond formal institutions. The emphasis on self-improvement and the diligent pursuit of learning, even outside official structures, fostered an intellectual environment that was surprisingly robust for a society that was politically isolated. This quiet cultivation of human capital meant that, when Japan eventually opened its doors to the world in the mid-19th century, it possessed a population with a foundational level of literacy and a capacity for absorbing new ideas that few non-Western nations could match. The long centuries of Edo peace had not been intellectually stagnant. Rather, they had been a period of quiet, pervasive growth in education, laying the silent groundwork for the rapid modernization that was to follow. The quiet flick of a brush on paper, the hushed whispers of students, the steady pursuit of knowledge in humble settings, these were the enduring sounds of education in the Edo period, a silent force that profoundly shaped Japan's destiny, preparing it for a future far beyond its tranquil shores. Having explored the more disciplined and intellectual facets of Edo period life, let us now step into the vibrant, yet still quietly orderly, world of seasonal festivals and celebrations. These events, known as Matsuri, provided essential punctuation marks in the year, offering communities across all social strata a much-needed respite from daily toil, a chance for communal bonding, and an opportunity to reaffirm cultural and spiritual connections. Far from being chaotic revelries, Edo festivals were steeped in tradition, marked by a unique blend of solemn ritual and spirited festivity. The rhythm of the Edo year was deeply intertwined with the agricultural calendar and the cycles of nature, which naturally influenced the timing and significance of many festivals. Spring, with its promise of new life, brought the celebrated Hanami or cherry blossom viewing. While not a formal religious festival, it was a ubiquitous national pastime. People of all classes would gather under the ephemeral pink blossoms, often in parks or along riverbanks, to enjoy picnics, sake, poetry, and music. It was a time of quiet contemplation of beauty and the fleeting nature of existence, intertwined with joyous social interaction. Imagine the soft rustle of petals falling like snow, the gentle murmur of appreciative conversations, the distant strum of a shamisen. These were the sounds of spring's delicate celebration. Summer, a period of intense agricultural labor, also brought festivals aimed at ensuring good harvests and warding off disease. The Jin Matsuri in Kyoto, for instance, remains one of Japan's most famous and ancient festivals, dating back to the 9th century. During the Edo period, it was a spectacular display, with massive, elaborately decorated floats, yamaboko, paraded through the streets, accompanied by traditional music and dancing. While visually grand, the underlying purpose was to purify the city and ward off epidemics. Even in the midst of such grandeur, there was an underlying quiet solemnity, a profound respect for the ritual. The rhythmic chanting of carriers, the deep boom of drums, the high-pitched notes of flutes, and the collective cheers of onlookers. These were the exhilarating sounds of summer devotion and celebration. Autumn, the season of harvest, was a time for expressing gratitude. Various local harvest festivals were held in villages and towns, offering thanks to the kami for bountiful crops. These celebrations were often more intimate and communal, focusing on shared feasts, traditional dances, kagura, and local performances. It was a time for neighbors to gather, share their bounty, and reinforce the bonds of community that were so vital for survival. The gentle clatter of shared bowls, the soft laughter of families, the rhythmic swaying of traditional dance, these were the quiet, contented sounds of autumn's gratitude. Winter, though a quieter season, had its own important celebrations, notably the New Year's festivities, Shigatsu. This was the most significant holiday of the year, a time for purification, renewal, and family gatherings. Homes were meticulously cleaned, special foods, oshirayori, were prepared, and families would visit local shrines and temples to offer prayers for health and prosperity in the coming year. Children would receive small gifts and play traditional games. The quiet solemnity of a family prayer at a home altar, the gentle ringing of temple bells on New Year's Eve, Joya no Kane, and the hushed anticipation of a fresh start, these were the sounds of winter's quiet reflection and hope. Beyond these major seasonal events, countless local matsuri dotted the calendar, specific to particular shrines, patron deities, or historical events. These often featured parades, street performances by acrobats or storytellers, and the sale of special foods and trinkets. While samurai might observe from a distance or attend specific, more formal ceremonies, commoners fully embraced the boisterous energy of these public spectacles. The distant strains of festival music, the murmur of excited crowds, the vibrant calls of street vendors, these created a lively backdrop to the more subdued rhythms of daily life. Even within these celebrations, the Edo period's emphasis on order and tradition remained. While there was joyous abandon, it was generally contained within established norms. The purpose was not chaos, but communal cohesion and spiritual renewal. Festivals reinforced the social fabric, allowing people to temporarily transcend their class differences in shared revelry, while ultimately returning to their appointed places within the shogunate's hierarchy. These festivals were also an important part of the ukiyo, or floating world, providing a stage for entertainment and cultural expression. Geisha and courtesans might perform, actors would stage special outdoor performances, and merchants would capitalize on the increased crowds. The vibrant energy generated by these public gatherings was a vital release valve for a society under strict governance, a temporary lifting of the quiet discipline that otherwise defined their lives. Thus, the seasonal festivals and celebrations of Edo Japan were far more than mere distractions. They were essential components of the social and spiritual landscape, providing a cyclical rhythm of joy, reflection, and communal reaffirmation. The vibrant sounds of celebration, the quiet moments of devotion, the shared laughter, and the collective awe before tradition. These were the rich and varied sounds that broke the daily quietude, painting a fuller, more dynamic picture of life under the enduring peace of the Tokugawa shogunate. From the vibrant energy of festivals, let us now transition to a more serene, yet equally profound, aspect of Edo period life: its deep-seated appreciation for arts, crafts, and aesthetics. Despite, or perhaps because of, the shogunate's emphasis on quiet order and restraint, a flourishing of artistic expression permeated every level of society. This wasn't merely about grand artworks for the elite. It was about infusing daily objects with beauty, cultivating refined sensibilities, and finding profound meaning in the delicate interplay of form, function, and emotion. At the pinnacle of aesthetic refinement for the elite, particularly the samurai, was the art of the tea ceremony, or chanoyu. Far more than simply drinking tea, chanoyu was a spiritual practice emphasizing harmony, wa, respect, kei, purity, sei, and tranquility, jaku. Every aspect, from the carefully chosen utensils, the tea bowl, whisk, and caddy, to the meticulously arranged garden leading to the tearoom, and the precise, graceful movements of the host, was designed to create a moment of serene contemplation. Imagine the quiet sizzle of water boiling in the kettle, the soft whisking of the matcha, the gentle clink of ceramic on lacquer, and the hushed atmosphere of profound concentration. These were the subtle sounds of an art form that distilled the essence of Japanese aesthetics into a single, shared moment. Complementing chanoyu was ikebana, the art of flower arranging. Unlike Western floral arrangements, ikebana emphasizes asymmetry, space, and a deep appreciation for nature. Each branch and blossom is carefully chosen and placed to reflect a specific sentiment or season, embodying a quiet philosophy of balance and transience. The careful snip of shears, the gentle rustle of leaves as a branch is adjusted, the silent appreciation of natural beauty. These were the intimate sounds of ikebana, an art form that brought the tranquility of nature indoors. For the urban commoners, especially in the floating world we previously explored, ukiyo-e woodblock prints emerged as a distinctive and widely accessible art form. As mentioned, these prints captured the ephemeral beauty of city life: kabuki actors, courtesans, sumo wrestlers, and scenic landscapes. They were a mass-produced art form, reflecting popular tastes and serving as a kind of contemporary media. The vibrant colors, dynamic compositions, and often satirical undertones of ukiyo-e offered a visual narrative of the era. Imagine the rhythmic tap of a carving tool on wood, the soft whisper of paper as an artist gently rubs a baren over a newly inked block, the quiet hum of the printing workshop. These were the sounds of an artistic revolution making beauty accessible to the masses. Craftsmanship, too, reached extraordinary levels during the Edo period. Artisans, though ranked lower than samurai, were highly respected for their skill and dedication. Swordsmiths continued to produce blades of unparalleled sharpness and beauty, though their practical use diminished. Lacquerware, pottery like imari and kutani ware, textiles, especially silk kimonos, and elaborate metalwork were all elevated to high art forms, often incorporating intricate designs and masterful techniques. Every object, from a simple sake cup to an ornate sword guard, was treated as a canvas for aesthetic expression. The precise hammer blows of a metalworker, the soft whir of a potter's wheel, the quiet concentration of a weaver at their loom, the gentle brushstrokes of a lacquer artist. These were the constant, focused sounds of a society where dedication to craft was synonymous with artistic excellence. Architecture, while often restrained and natural, also expressed deep aesthetic principles. Traditional Japanese homes and tea houses emphasized natural materials, harmony with the surrounding landscape, and flexible interior spaces defined by sliding paper screens, shoji and fusuma. Gardens, whether grand landscapes for daimyo or small, contemplative spaces for commoners, were designed to evoke natural scenes, often incorporating stones, water, and carefully pruned trees to create miniature worlds of tranquility. The quiet creak of wooden floors, the soft rustle of shoji screens sliding open, the gentle splash of water in a pond. These were the ambient sounds of Edo period architecture, designed to foster peace and connection with nature. Even writing, in the form of calligraphy, shodo, was considered a high art. The precise brushstrokes, the balance of characters, and the flow of ink on paper were seen as reflections of the writer's character and inner spirit. Poetry, particularly the concise haiku, which captured fleeting moments of nature or human experience, flourished among all classes. The quiet dip of a brush into an inkstone, the soft whisper of silk on paper, the thoughtful pause before composing a verse. These were the quiet sounds of literary and calligraphic artistry. The pervasive aesthetic sensibility meant that even everyday objects were imbued with beauty. A simple bento box, a set of chopsticks, or a cloth wrapper for a gift could be exquisitely designed. This quiet dedication to beauty in the mundane was a defining characteristic of Edo Japan, reflecting a society that found profound meaning not in grandiosity, but in the careful cultivation of refinement and harmony in every detail of life. The arts and crafts of the Edo period were not mere embellishments. They were fundamental expressions of a culture that valued discipline, precision, and an intimate connection with nature. They provided avenues for creativity, quiet contemplation, and shared cultural experiences, binding society together in a common appreciation for beauty. From the solemnity of the tea ceremony to the vibrancy of ukiyo-e, the quiet dedication to aesthetic excellence was a silent force, shaping the landscape, enriching daily lives, and leaving an indelible mark on Japan's enduring cultural legacy under the enduring peace of the Tokugawa shogunate. Having explored the aesthetic and artistic dimensions that quietly enriched Edo life, let us now consider the intricate arteries that connected this vast, peaceful realm, the Gekkeido, or the five highways. These meticulously maintained routes were not just pathways for trade and communication. They were the very sinews of the shogunate's control, facilitating the flow of people, goods, and information across the archipelago. Travel on these roads, while often arduous, was a vital part of Edo period existence, experienced differently by each social class. The Gekkeido comprised 5 main routes radiating from Edo: the Tokaido Eastern Sea Road, Nakasendo Central Mountain Road, Koshukaido, Oshukaido, and Nikkokaido. Of these, the Tokaido, stretching along the Pacific coast between Edo and Kyoto, was by far the most famous and heavily traveled. It was immortalized in countless ukiyo-e prints, most notably by Hiroshige. These highways were a testament to the shogunate's commitment to internal stability and administrative efficiency. Imagine the quiet hum of activity that constantly permeated these routes: the rhythmic padding of feet, the creak of palanquins, the distant shouts of porters, and the soft murmur of conversations as travelers encountered one another. For the samurai, travel on the Gekkeido was an unavoidable and often burdensome aspect of their duties, primarily due to the Sankinkatai system, or alternate attendants. This policy, designed to prevent daimyo from accumulating too much wealth or power in their domains, required them to spend alternating years in Edo, serving the shogun. When returning to their domains, their wives and eldest sons were often required to remain in Edo as virtual hostages. These processions, sometimes numbering in the thousands, were enormous logistical undertakings, involving hundreds of samurai, servants, porters, and horses, carrying everything from personal effects to administrative documents. The cost of Sankinkatai was immense, deliberately draining the daimyo's coffers and preventing them from funding rebellions. The quiet, disciplined march of these grand processions, the rhythmic beat of drums accompanying their passage, the hushed respect of onlookers, these were the sounds of power on the move, a constant reaffirmation of the shogunate's authority. For merchants, the Gekkeido were lifelines. They traveled these routes to transport goods between cities, expanding their networks and accumulating wealth. Their journeys were typically less ostentatious than those of the daimyo, often involving walking or riding in simpler palanquins, accompanied by a few porters. They sought out opportunities, negotiated prices, and forged connections that were the bedrock of the Edo economy. The quiet jingle of coins in a leather purse, the murmur of bargaining at a wayside inn, the rhythmic squeak of a laden cart, these were the sounds of commerce traversing the land, connecting distant markets. Commoners also traveled the Gekkeido, though usually for specific purposes like pilgrimages to famous temples or shrines, visiting distant family, or seeking work. For them, travel was often on foot, arduous and slow, relying on the network of post towns, shukuba, for lodging and provisions. These post towns, strategically located along the highways, provided inns, hatego, tea houses, shops, and stables. They were bustling hubs where travelers from all walks of life converged, exchanging news and experiencing a slice of the floating world even far from the major cities. The quiet conversations in a crowded inn, the murmur of travelers exchanging stories, the gentle sounds of food preparation, these were the sounds of human connection forged on the road. Security on the Gekkeido was relatively high, reflecting the shogunate's emphasis on peace and order. Travelers passed through numerous checkpoints, sekisho, where officials inspected their passes and goods. These checkpoints were particularly strict regarding the passage of weapons and the unauthorized movement of women, to prevent wives of daimyo from escaping Edo. While a necessary part of the system, they could also be places of quiet delay and bureaucratic scrutiny. The sharp challenge of a guard, the rustle of official papers being checked, the quiet sigh of relief upon clearance, these were the sounds of controlled movement. Communication, in the absence of modern technology, relied heavily on these physical routes. Messengers, often swift runners, carried official documents and important news between Edo and the domains. For personal communication, letters were hand-carried by travelers or specialized couriers. This reliance on human movement meant that information traveled slowly, deliberately, but reliably. The quiet padding of a runner's feet through the night, the whispered exchange of urgent messages, the soft scratching of a brush as a letter was penned. These were the sounds of an information network powered by human endurance. The Gekkeido were more than just roads, they were cultural arteries. Along them flowed not just people and goods, but ideas, fashions, and stories. The landscapes seen along the routes became subjects for art and literature, and the experiences of travel became part of the shared national consciousness. The quiet beauty of the changing scenery, the distant cry of a bird, the rhythmic creak of a boat crossing a river, these were the subtle, ambient sounds of travel, enriching the journey itself. In essence, the Gekkeido embodied the dual nature of Edo Japan, a system of strict control designed to maintain peace, yet also a vibrant network that fostered internal exchange and shaped a unique national identity. The quiet, persistent movement along these historic highways was a fundamental part of the era's enduring tranquility, connecting disparate parts of the realm and ensuring that the shogun's peace resonated from the castle walls of Edo to the farthest reaches of the archipelago. Having traversed the physical pathways of Edo Japan, let us now turn our senses to a more intimate and fundamental aspect of daily life, the food and cuisine that sustained its millions. From the austere meals of the samurai to the frugal sustenance of the peasants, and the evolving culinary delights of the urban commoners, food in the Edo period was not just about survival. It reflected social status, regional diversity, and a developing appreciation for flavor and presentation that continues to influence Japanese cuisine today. The quiet preparation of meals, the communal sounds of dining, and the subtle aromas of cooking were integral to the rhythm of life. At its core, Edo period cuisine was built upon a foundation of rice. For the samurai and wealthy urbanites, white rice was a daily staple, a symbol of their status. For the peasants, however, the very rice they cultivated was often too precious to consume regularly due to heavy taxation. Their diet leaned more towards coarser grains like millet, barley, and various forms of gruel, supplemented with locally grown vegetables. Imagine the quiet, rhythmic pounding of rice for husking in a rural village, or the gentle steaming of a pot of white rice in a samurai household. These were the fundamental sounds of daily sustenance. Beyond rice, the Edo diet was rich in fermented foods, which were essential for preservation and flavor in an era without refrigeration. Miso, fermented soybean paste, shoyu, soy sauce, and various forms of pickles, tsukimono, were ubiquitous. These ferments provided umami, balanced flavors, and added crucial nutrients. The subtle, tangy aroma of pickling vegetables, the quiet bubbling of miso in a pot, the delicate splash of soy sauce being poured, these were the constant, underlying scents and sounds of a cuisine built on fermentation. Vegetables formed a significant part of everyone's diet. Seasonal vegetables, both cultivated and wild-foraged, provided variety and nutrition. Daikon radish, eggplant, cucumber, and various greens were common. Preparation was often simple, boiling, steaming, or pickling to preserve their natural flavors. Seaweed, gathered from the abundant coastline, was another vital component, adding minerals and a distinct marine flavor to dishes. For those living near rivers or the coast, fish was a crucial source of protein. Fresh fish was consumed in cities, while dried, salted, or fermented fish products were transported inland. Meat, due to Buddhist influences and practical constraints, livestock was primarily for labor, was rarely consumed, though wild game like boar or deer might be eaten in rural areas by hunters. The cooking methods were typically simple and efficient, reflecting resourcefulness and a respect for ingredients. Boiling nimono, steaming mushimono, grilling yakimono, and stir-frying were common. Deep frying agimono, as seen in dishes like tempura, gradually gained popularity, particularly in urban centers, but was more of a luxury. The quiet sizzle of grilling fish over charcoal, the gentle whisper of steam from a bamboo basket, the soft bubbling of a simmering pot, these were the everyday acoustic textures of Edo kitchens. For the samurai, meals were generally austere, reflecting their warrior ethos and Confucian values of frugality. While they ate well, their dining was less about indulgence and more about sustenance and discipline. Their meals might include white rice, miso soup, pickled vegetables, and grilled fish, served with a quiet dignity. The hushed clatter of lacquer bowls, the soft sips of miso soup, the restrained conversation, these characterized samurai mealtimes. In contrast, the rising merchant class in the cities began to foster a more diverse and even indulgent food culture. Restaurants, ryotai, and street food vendors proliferated, offering a wide array of dishes. Sushi, while present, was likely a simpler form than today's, often involving preserved fish and vinegar rice. Soba buckwheat noodles and udon wheat noodles became popular, quick meals for busy urbanites. Tempura, originally a Portuguese introduction, was adapted and popularized. The lively chatter of a busy soba shop, the sizzling of tempura batter in hot oil, the calls of street vendors hawking their wares, these were the more boisterous sounds of urban gastronomy. The concept of washoku, traditional Japanese cuisine, with its emphasis on seasonality, local ingredients, balanced flavors, and beautiful presentation, began to solidify during the Edo period. The practice of kaiseki, multi-course haute cuisine, originally linked to the tea ceremony, also developed, showcasing the chef's artistry and the delicate balance of tastes and textures. Even for the commoners, there was an underlying appreciation for the aesthetic presentation of food, even in simple meals. The careful arrangement of food in a bento box, the subtle garnish of a dish, the quiet appreciation of a meal's visual harmony, these were the visual elements that elevated eating beyond mere sustenance. The availability of food, however, was always precarious for the majority, especially peasants. Famines, caused by natural disasters like drought, floods, or volcanic eruptions, were a recurring threat throughout the Edo period, often leading to widespread suffering and even death. The quiet rumbling of hunger, the hushed anxieties about the next harvest, the desperate measures taken to find sustenance. These were the grim realities that often overshadowed the relative culinary abundance of the cities. Despite these challenges, the Edo period was a crucial era for the development of Japanese cuisine. It saw the refinement of traditional dishes, the emergence of a diverse urban food scene, and the laying of the groundwork for the culinary reputation Japan enjoys today. The quiet satisfaction of a well-cooked meal, the shared warmth of a family gathering around a simple spread, the evolving tastes of a nation at peace. These were the enduring sounds and flavors that nourished the people of Edo Japan, day in and day out, through centuries of quiet tranquility. As our journey through the quiet heart of Edo Japan draws to a close, we find ourselves reflecting on a remarkable era in human history. a period of over 2.5 centuries of unparalleled peace and stability. We have walked the structured paths of the samurai, heard the industrious hum of the merchant quarter, felt the quiet resilience of the peasant's labor, and glimpsed the vibrant, yet controlled, energy of the floating world. We have explored the intricate web of social hierarchies, the unique forms of justice, the traditional approaches to health, the deep-seated spiritual beliefs, the burgeoning literacy, and the rich tapestry of arts and festivals that define this tranquil realm. Throughout this exploration, a consistent theme has emerged: the pervasive sense of quietude. It was a quiet born not of silence, but of order, discipline, and a profound cultural emphasis on harmony and restraint. The soft rustle of silk, the gentle murmur of conversation in tea houses, the rhythmic sounds of daily toil in the fields, the hushed reverence at a shrine, the patient scratch of a brush on paper. These were the ambient sounds of an era where even great spectacles were underpinned by meticulous planning and a deep respect for tradition. The sleepless historian has endeavored to peer beyond the grand narratives of political power and famous battles, to illuminate the subtler, more intimate realities of life for the ordinary people who lived through this long peace. It is in these quiet details, a peasant's humble meal, a merchant's careful calculation, a geisha's practiced grace, a scholar's diligent study, that the true texture of Edo society reveals itself. It was a life lived largely within prescribed boundaries, yet within those boundaries, people found ways to create beauty, foster community, pursue knowledge, and celebrate the simple rhythms of existence. This era, however, was not static. Beneath the tranquil surface, currents of change were slowly, almost imperceptibly, gathering strength. The rise of the merchant class challenged the rigid social hierarchy. The influx of Rangaku stirred intellectual curiosity, and the internal economic pressures subtly strained the shogunate's control. These quiet, internal shifts laid the groundwork for the monumental changes that would sweep over Japan in the mid-19th century, with the arrival of Commodore Perry's black ships and the dramatic end of isolation. The Edo period's legacy is profound and enduring. It fostered a unique cultural identity, solidified artistic traditions, cultivated a highly literate populace, and instilled a deep appreciation for order and aesthetics that continues to shape Japan today. The quiet lessons learned during those centuries of peace, lessons of discipline, resilience, collective harmony, and the pursuit of beauty in the everyday, remain fundamental to understanding the spirit of Japan. As we close this chapter, let us remember not just the powerful shoguns or the grand castles, but the countless quiet lives lived beneath the watchful, yet ultimately unchanging, sky of Edo Japan. It is in their enduring spirit, their quiet persistence, and their subtle contributions that the true story of this remarkable age resides. The echoes of their lives, their quiet dreams, and their profound journey through centuries of peace continue to resonate, inviting the sleepless historian to listen closely, long after the last page has turned. Thank you for joining me on this journey.